7 to attend the assembly for the state championship marching band. I got to read a proclamation across the street there, so I'll hand it off to Alderman Bekavich at that time. Item 2 is minutes of the October 14th meeting.
Dickman makes a motion that we approve the minutes of the October 14th, 2014 meeting.
If I can interject here for just
Sure.
a second, I'm sorry. Commissioner Chandler had sent me an email saying that she would like to have the minutes reflect a clarification that Mayor Scafidi had mentioned the reason for the submission of several CSMs related to DTS, Drexel Town Square, was because the submissions were made prior to the council making a decision to allow CSMs to create lots in excess of originally 4 up to 8. So basically it was a timing issue that they had to submit so many. It's a long-winded explanation to say that they submitted before they were able to condense the number of submissions.
Okay, so noted.
We don't have to do anything with the minutes, you're just explaining it?
It would be reflected in the minutes as an amendment.
Okay.
Guzekowski will second.
Roll call.
Dickman, aye.
Johnston, aye.
Carrillo, aye.
Bekavich, aye.
Scafidi, aye.
Guzekowski, aye.
Corral, aye.
Seifert abstains.
Item 3 is significant common council actions carried.
Council approved two resolutions approving CSMs for the property at 331 West Drexel Avenue. Mr. Mayor.
Wow, that was fast. Moving to 4A, it's a certified survey map submitted by Matthew Lyons, Azura LLC, for the property at 8870 South Mayhew Drive. Multiple tax key numbers. Carrie.
Applicant is requesting approval to divide the lot highlighted in red on your screen into 2 lots. It would be north-south, as depicted in the CSM. Basically, the dividing line would be just north of the existing professional office condo building. This is in anticipation of a submission for approval of a community-based residential facility to be put on Lot 1. The existing building would meet all required setbacks post-CSM. Staff has reviewed the request, and some concerns were raised regarding easements and water and sewer infrastructure. These concerns were then relayed to the applicant and will be incorporated into the CSM as technical corrections prior to recording. Staff recommendation on the CSM is that the Plan Commission recommends to the Common Council that the certified survey map submitted by Matthew Lyons, representative of Azura LLC, for the property at 8870 South Mayhew Drive be approved with the condition that all technical corrections are made prior to recording. Mr. Mayor.
And representative of the applicant is here. Just identify yourself for the record, name and address.
My name is Matthew Lyons. Address is 3390 South Wadsworth Boulevard, Lakewood, Colorado.
Thank you. Open it up to any questions or comments from the commission. Commissioner Seifert?
Yeah, there's 2 things that I'd like to make sure that we do have on the certified survey map. One is that we have the 25-foot easement added because of the lateral. And 2, that it needs to be inspected and approved to the state statutes prior to acceptance at the utility.
Either of those cause you any heartburn?
No, sir, they were previously addressed by Ms. Papelbon in the comments to the CSM.
Okay.
We did have a question by Commissioner Chandler, who is not here, as to whether those comments you did receive by the utility were something that you feel you can address.
I believe so, yes.
Okay.
Okay. Other questions? Seeing none, motion on 4A.
Corral moves that the commission recommends to Common Council that the certified survey map submitted by Matthew Lyons, Azura LLC, for the property at 8870 South Mayhew Drive be approved with the condition that all technical corrections are made prior to recording.
Guzekowski will second.
Roll call.
Dickman, aye.
Johnston, aye.
Carrillo, aye.
Bekavich, aye.
Scafidi, aye.
Guzekowski, aye.
Corral, aye.
Seifert, aye.
All right, moving to 4B, it's a rezone and conditional use request submitted by Matthew Lyons, Azura LLC, to rezone a portion of the property at 8870 South Mayhew Drive from B4 Highway Business to RM1 Multifamily Residential with a conditional use for a community-based residential facility with a capacity of more than 15 residents, and this has a multiple tax key numbers. Carrie.
So this is related to the same property that we just spoke about for the CSM, and I will just say that the history of this property is one that is kind of interesting. Originally, the proposal was to have 2 condo buildings to mimic the same one that is existing today. Unfortunately, that second phase was never built. Then there was an application that was brought last year, but was never heard by the Plan Commission to split the parcel and put an apartment complex on the northern part of the property. What you have before you is a proposal to rezone to RM1 for the northern half of the property in anticipation of a community-based residential facility as a conditional use on the property. I will also add that since the existing building has been built, the area has seen little in the way of business development, and that the comprehensive plan identifies this area for mixed use, which would coincide with the application here. It would help to achieve that goal of creating a mixed-use community, which actually exists there already with the existing businesses. You have the Pick and Save right here, post office here. This is the proposed site for the, well, I shouldn't say proposed, it's the site of the new fire department, and then some apartment buildings in here. The proposal is for a 2-phase development, and I will actually turn it over to the applicant in just a minute to give you an overview of the facility and the proposal. But I just wanted to draw the commission's attention to page 2 of the report, where you will be asked to rule on 3 different requests as part of this application. One is whether the requested increase in density for senior housing is appropriate. The CBRF is requesting that the density be increased to what is in the code for senior housing. And that's based on the incidence of the treatment of Alzheimer's and dementia for residents. That usually happens at a specific age, usually in your elder years. So according to the code, housing for the elderly is allowed as a conditional use in the RM1 district, provided that the density of such housing shall not exceed 27 units per acre and shall meet the minimum per unit building area specified. The second request is whether a CBRF may be allowed within 2,500 feet of an existing CBRF. I have been informed by the city attorney that this actually is really no longer a concern, although it is stated in statute. There's been some case law that says that the location of a CBRF closer to another CBRF than 2,500 feet is really not an issue. But you should probably reflect that you have what your decision is on that, whether you feel it's appropriate for the CBRF to be in this location. Finally, whether a reduction in the minimum parking number of parking stalls is appropriate. The proposal is to construct 42 stalls for employees and residents. Now, again, residents will be Alzheimer's and dementia patients who will primarily be not driving. So there's a proposal, well, the proposal includes stalls for 18 employees, and then 22 stalls at a rate of 1 space per 3 residents, which is more in line with the requirements for elderly housing. So with that, I will say that the staff recommendation is that the Plan Commission recommends to the Common Council that the property at 8870 South Mayhew Drive be rezoned from B4 Highway Business to RM1 Multifamily Residential with a conditional use for a community-based residential facility with a capacity for more than 15 persons after a public hearing. And I will turn it over to the applicant for a presentation.
Before you start, did you have a question?
Yeah, I think, Mayor, at first, if we, in looking at this, which I think is a good use for it, changing the zoning to multifamily, we already had one thing that didn't go through. If this doesn't go through, have we opened it up for the non-conditional use? In other words, are we making it multifamily? Are we leaving ourselves open if this doesn't happen? Does it
No,
revert back?
and I will just clarify that the
Good question.
application that we received last year The applicants at that time actually withdrew before it came to the Plan Commission. So it wasn't that it was denied. It wasn't that, there was anything like that. Now, for this specific use, in the conditions and restrictions, there's a time frame for compliance. So assuming that something happens in between the approval time, if it is approved, and something, happens with financing or it just becomes infeasible, after a certain time frame, that conditional use will expire.
And that zoning would expire. It might
The zoning would revert back.
revert
to-
back.
Yes, if you specify that, yes.
Yes, okay,
Okay, that would be my concern. Thanks.
good point.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you tonight. I appreciate it. And
Red button is, no, that's for point
Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you tonight. I'd like to start off by just giving you a little bit of a background about who Azura is and what we are. Go to the next slide. So we were founded by Josh McClellan in 2009. Josh grew up in the senior housing industry. His family operated a nursing home several years ago when he was growing up, and Josh ended up taking over that community and growing several other communities throughout Ohio where he was raised, and ended up transferring out of ownership of those communities. And really through his experience in 20 years in the industry, felt that there was, we could do this better. We could better care for our elders, and specifically for those with memory care who, it's kind of, communities are often and people are often in denial about Alzheimer's and dementia until you're confronted with, the disease in your family or someone that you know. And Azura was founded to transform the culture of care within the dementia care space, specifically in memory care. Again, founded in 2009. Since then, we've acquired a portfolio and began growing within the state of Wisconsin. We currently have 12 memory care communities throughout the state. We currently care for 231 residents. To Carrie's point before regarding the age of our residents, the average age across our portfolio is 81 years of age. So definitely qualifies as senior housing. We do have, I believe, 11 residents that are under the age of 65, about 4% of our portfolio, which is just really reflective of earlier onset dementia, which can be caused by alcohol or frontal lobe dementia and different variants of the disease. And so, we do care for folks that are under the age of 65, but the intent is to care specifically for those that are affected by Alzheimer's and dementia. And with our 231 residents, we currently have about 260 employees throughout the state. So we're a very care-focused model. We have one-to-one employees. It's 24/7 care, and generally a ratio of 4 to 5 caregivers per resident. Sorry. 4 to 5 residents per caregiver, which is higher than kind of typical ratios definitely within the nursing home industry and even within the assisted living and memory care industries. So as I mentioned, our mission as a company is to transform the culture of care. We do that by living our core values on a daily basis. And Mosaic is essentially our programming. It's a proprietary programming that was developed that's utilized in all of our homes. And I'll explain that on the next slide here. So Mosaic, again, an acronym that was developed by the company. This really emphasizes training of every person that comes into our homes. And that training is really to educate people about Alzheimer's, what the disease is, and what caring for someone with that disease involves. And, as I have written up here, it really promotes caring for folks by understanding what they're going through. Our intent is often to try and reduce the amount of psychotropic medications and that sort of thing, and really promote quality of life through engagement in individuals. And a couple of the pictures up here, these are actually videos, but I apologize, the links are not working right now. But this is actually an initiative that the company created called a New Dreams Initiative. And you know, some of our caregivers who have gone through our training and that sort of thing started asking residents, you know, what would their best day be? And the image on the left is a gentleman that has Parkinson's and dementia, and was living in one of our homes. And you know, he wanted to win the Masters, and obviously, at his age and with this condition, that wasn't in the cards. But he had given up playing golf for several years before moving into our community, and wasn't really walking anymore. And through engaging him in this dream of his, we were able to get him up and walking again. We got him golf lessons. There were clubs that were donated and that sort of thing. And he went out and played 9 holes of golf at a local country club. And we presented him with a green jacket and a trophy and the whole thing. And it really made this guy's day. And that's our goal as a company, is to make days like this for our residents. And that's what we hope to accomplish. So, and you know, with our proposed building next door, we'll be hoping to accomplish that for residents within your community as well. So this is the proposed building that we're looking at tonight. So there we go. So this here is a current entrance. The condo building is in this section of the what would be lot 2, I believe. And then this is an existing paved entrance, and this parking is existing on the site as well. What we're contemplating doing is entering into a shared access and parking agreement with the owner of the existing building, who owns our lot currently. And then, so this 14 stalls is mirrored on this side by another 14 stalls. And that would be shared parking for both the condos and for our community. So the 42, I believe, parking stalls that we have only includes this half. And so there would be some potential excess parking through that shared parking agreement. And then the remaining of the parking would be in this lot here, which meets all of the zoning requirements and setbacks. And then we would just be proposing one entrance onto Mayhew Drive in this area. So again, this whole parcel is 2.57 acres. We're proposing 44 beds, which would be in 40 units, so a couple of shared rooms. If couples often like to live together, if you know, if one of them has Alzheimer's or dementia and the other doesn't, but is elderly and can't care for their spouse to the full extent, they'll move in as a couple, and so we'll have some shared rooms for that purpose as well. Hence the 44 beds for 40 units. But our residents do not drive with their condition. It would not be appropriate. By the time they move into our communities, they're generally in middle to late stage dementia, which is not appropriate for driving. So parking for that reason would not be a concern. The parking that we've proposed at the 42 stalls, which is 1 parking stall per 3 residents, plus 1 per staff at our peak shift, actually mirrors what is required in your zoning code for nursing homes, which we felt was the most applicable fit for our use, given the lack of driving of our residents. And so, yeah, and our proposal is requesting the zoning change to the RM1 with the conditional use for community living. As Carrie mentioned, the elderly housing conditional use allows up to 27 units per acre. With our proposal of 66 beds or 60 units, I believe that comes out to about 23 units per acre, and slightly more than that on a beds per acre basis. So it's well within that senior housing allowance. And some of the impacts. Actually, if you could go to the next slide as well, sorry. This is a picture of a concept picture of one of our communities that isn't currently in the development process as well. This is essentially what we would anticipate this community to look like. And again, a Class CNA licensed CBRF for memory care programming. And the next slide again as well. So some of the impacts that would be beneficial to the community for a community, for a facility such as this. You're going to have 66 memory care beds. This is a memory loss and Alzheimer's and dementia are a growing disease within America. Currently, about 13% of the age 65 plus population is afflicted with some form of Alzheimer's or dementia. And then within your community, the age 65 plus category population is expected to grow by about 15.5% by the year 2018. So you have some significant growth in that population. And based on our analysis of current demand versus current supply, there is a pretty significant gap that justifies the construction of new beds within your community to help care for those folks. Obviously, traffic and some issues that would be common to multifamily and other uses, business uses, would be minimized by having a senior housing, memory care assisted living community here. As I mentioned, our peak shift is 18 employees. We stagger our shift change over about a 2-hour period, so it's every, a couple of caregivers, a couple of employees would be staggered every 30 minutes. We do that, really we do that for our own purposes. We want to maximize the quality of care, and by having one shift change like a hospital does, was everybody comes in and everybody comes out all at the same time, it increases traffic and burden on the city. But for us, there's an opportunity for a gap in care, and that's the reason. That's the real reason that we do that. But it has a nice benefit as reducing traffic coming and going from the property as well. And then with our staffing ratios, as I mentioned previously, we have about 1 employee to 1 resident throughout our company. We would expect a similar level of staffing here. So potential for 65 to 70 new employees for the city. And then obviously with the vacant parcel there, tax utilization for the city is obviously not optimized, and by having what would be somewhere in the neighborhood of a $6 to $9 million project on that site would obviously increase the property taxes for the city and provide a positive economic development. So that is an overview of Azura and the project and what we're looking to achieve here. I hope you agree with us that it could be a beneficial use for the city, and appreciate your time and hearing.
Pending approvals, what would your timeline be to construct the building and open it?
Our goal is to be in ground as soon as the frost is gone, April, May of 2015.
Okay. Questions or comments? Commissioner Dickman?
And you have 2 phases you were talking about. Are you going to concentrate just on phase 1 right away, or what is your timing on that?
Yeah, I mean, our initial process would be to construct phase 1, get it stabilized, and get a good feel for the market, increase our brand and that sort of thing, and then within 1 to 2 years, depending on the timing of all that, we would begin construction on phase 2.
Okay, and also the location is very appropriate for these type of seniors because it's right by the new fire department, and I think every time we've heard the fire department talk, that's where most of your activity comes from as far as emergency calls, senior living. Is that correct? Yeah.
Generally, we anticipate that for every bed of senior housing in the city, that's 1 call per year. Now, that's an average across all the beds in a community, and certainly the facilities that are more intensive care would have a higher call incidence than those that would be more independent living. But generally, the industry average is 1 call per bed per year.
Okay, so the location, I think, is very favorable, I would think, for this unit. And then you used the word condo in your presentation. Did I misunderstand?
There's an existing office condominium building that's adjacent to ours.
Adjacent,
that will be
okay, and you tie into that. Okay.
Right, that's what the CSM is separating us from that office condo.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Alderman Bekavich?
I like the concept. I think it's a nice-looking plan. Regarding the 3 issues that Carrie had brought up about increasing the density, if it's appropriate. For this particular use, I would deem it appropriate, given the clientele that you are dealing with. And Carrie said it's not an issue, but within 2,500 feet of one of our existing CBRFs.
Correct.
Is that correct? I don't have a lot of heartburn. I'm not very familiar with Meadowmere. Is it Meadowmere over there? Or
Yeah,
Manor?
Mitchell Manor is within the
Yeah,
middle area.
I'm not sure if that's a different type of facility, if that's more of a long-term care versus memory care. I'm not exactly sure, but I myself feel okay with that. And a reduction in parking, again, I have an elderly mother, and driving is not an issue with her at that point in time. It's really just visitors at holidays and things of that nature. So I'm feeling pretty good about it. I guess I would like the fire department to weigh in on anything we might have missed, because obviously I'm not super familiar with these things. You mentioned the number of calls. Is there anything else we should be looking at in particular for the rest of the committee?
And I should jump back. I don't know if I completely answered your question. You know, the proximity to the fire department certainly reduces the response time, and you
Right,
have a
right.
concentration in that area of elderly housing. And certainly with that comes an increased call volume, and the proximity to the fire station, even the old station and the new station, certainly reduces response times to those facilities. You know, certainly are we missing anything from the fire department's perspective?
Well, I guess from a committee's perspective, is there something we should be concerned about looking at? Obviously, it's going to be sprinkled, it's going to be fire alarmed, things of that nature, but is there anything else we should be concerned about from a safety point of view, public safety point of view with protective services?
From a code compliance, and certainly these buildings are regulated by local ordinances, national codes, and then the state of Wisconsin. So you've got multiple agencies that weigh in on the structure and the fire protection needs. You know, certainly that's something, as the building plans come through, we'll talk with the owner and occupant about the fire suppression needs and make sure that those are all addressed. The only thing that I would ask, and I'm not speaking specifically to this project, but the more facilities you have, and obviously elderly housing will be a continuing issue in our community. You're going to see more of these facilities. You know, certainly, I think globally, the council needs to consider the impact on protective services as a whole. As you build these facilities, there's an impact with call volume and resources spent at them. And I'm not saying we are at any breaking point. I just want to make sure that you're aware that as these communities become more prevalent, it does add to the resource utilization of your protective services.
Okay. And I guess that's one of the hidden things we don't always think of right off the get-go that should be considered down the stretch. Thank you, Mike.
Any other questions or concerns?
Mayor Scafidi?
Sure, come on up, Mr. Degner.
Arden Degner, 8540 South Pennsylvania Avenue. The Assistant Chief had a very valid point in that we are being faced with not only a possible impact fee for school children in these apartments on this Drexel Town Square, but we should probably consider an impact fee for the fire department for this type of construction, this type of unit. If those calls are going to be at the expense of protection of the remainder of the community.
Thank you for your comments. Terry, do you have a comment?
Yes, actually, I just wanted to let everyone know that Commissioner Chandler did submit some questions, some of which have already been answered tonight. But she did want to know, based on the code requirements, how many parking stalls would be at the facility. It depends on which definition would apply for the proposed use. Now, if it's elderly housing, then it would be less than actually what is being proposed, and then but if it's based on just a regular kind of multifamily unit, or basically it would be either a one space per unit requirement or a 1.5 space per unit requirement for a traditional efficiency / one-bedroom multifamily. For elderly, it's reduced down to what basically they are proposing for spaces. And in fact, when you consider the opportunity for shared parking with the property to the south, that actually goes, again, beyond what they're required by code if you consider the elderly housing requirement. And then lastly, Commissioner Chandler wanted to know what the difference is for the proposed design of the building versus your other existing facilities. What makes this one different from your others?
Is it any different in design, or will it be any different in design than the ones you currently have in the state?
Yeah, so many of the properties that we have now were a portfolio that were acquired, and they were that portfolio was constructed primarily in the early 90s. So many of those were under codes and that sort of thing from that point in time. What we've done recently, I just joined the company in April of this year, and the company had already started, and I finalized the process of working with our architects in essentially taking the best of all of the memory care specific homes that we have currently. We've worked with our staff and with the experts that we have within our company in the Alzheimer's and dementia field, and as well as plentiful amounts of research to come up with a design that we feel will maximize the ability for us to care for our residents, and then also to maximize efficiencies. And we've designed this building as a prototype that we will be using going forward. We do have two other developments that are ahead of this one that are in process. We have one that's actually going to be breaking ground this fall. We're hoping to break ground next week, actually, in Kenosha. And then we have another project that's in the planning process with this. It's actually the image that I showed you is from another project that's in a western Milwaukee suburb as well.
Okay. Anything else from Commissioner Chandler, who's not here?
No, but I did think of one other thing as Mr. Lyons was speaking, and that would be, would you be comfortable with a condition of approval at the next stage, at the November 11th Plan Commission meeting, that would require that all patients be 65 plus or in conjunction with what our code requires as elderly?
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult operationally. As I mentioned, currently we only have about 4% of our entire portfolio that's under the age of 65. We would prefer not to have that condition because we want to be able to care for folks within your community that have early onset dementia. So having an age restriction on our ability to care affects our ability to care for people within your community. Again, those folks that come to our community that are under the age of 65, that have dementia, physically and functionally are at the same level as the 70 and 80-year-olds. I mean, there are minor differences depending on their onset and the level of progression of the disease. But there really isn't a huge difference between a 55-year-old person with dementia and a 75-year-old person with dementia as far as their functionality.
So is the lower limit of age, regardless of that, 55, or is it 35? Is it 25?
Honestly, that's a good question. I don't know what the bottom of that age is. I don't believe we have anyone below the age of 55. But I would
be comfortable with a limit of a bottom limit of 55 years old.
I think that would be acceptable.
It would be more consistent with the elderly housing aspect of, I think, what we're talking about.
No.
Yeah?
No, I agree. I think it's a good point.
The other thing that I had thought about with this potential issue as well is the density issue becomes a concern with the phase 2 of our project, and if the commission, if the city were comfortable with placing a 55 plus restriction on the phase 2 20 units and leaving the primary 40 units unrestricted, that would be favorable to us. Again, just in the incident that there's someone that has an early onset that was 54 or whatever reason, we would want the ability to care for them. I
guess the concern would be, and you got to be really careful when you're talking about these issues, is that we end up with a facility that has many people that are of younger age with dementia issues and not really representing what you're presenting today. I guess does that kind of touch on the concern? And there is a difference in not only what those patients need, but also the care they might need and the length of time those people would need. And also just from the stature and the physicality of a younger patient versus an older patient, there's some issues there as well, some challenges for public safety.
There are also some challenges in terms of enforcing that too. So, the code does specify what elderly, the definition of what elderly is. So it's a matter of, are we granting, would the Plan Commission be accepting of a modification to the standard without actually having that modification meet the standard? I'm not saying that properly, but basically, we're giving an increase in density for an elderly facility that doesn't have any elderly patients. I think
That's the concern.
so. It's kind of semantics because you are dealing with a certain type of patient. As you said, once you get into this type of illness, the age difference in terms of care is not the concern, but perhaps you would need more resources in order to care for the older generation rather than somebody who came in at 55. I'm not, that's not based on anything because I'm not an expert in this area, but.
All right, let me just ask it this way. So the majority of the residents at this facility will be older than 65 years old. Is that what you're telling us?
Correct.
Okay. Do we have to worry as a commission or as a city, in the case of the alderman and the mayor, that this would become a facility that had many people under that age at some point making up the majority of the residents there?
No, sir, I don't believe so. Like I said, our average age right now is 81 years,
Yeah.
so.
Okay. All right, I'm going to quickly move around. Commissioner Johnston.
Just a concept here, if you're looking at using or starting in April or May of next year, would you be willing to have a reversion of this zoning for 1 year? So say November 1st, 2015, if you guys didn't start this project, that would revert back and you'd have to come back if you move forward with it.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I'm not sure what the city's specific statutes are on that, but generally, in other communities, it's, if we haven't pulled our first permit within 1 year, then the reversion would go into place, and I'd be absolutely comfortable with something along those lines.
We did put that into our recommendation then.
Well,
My second question would be to Mike, do you have any issues with access around the building as it's laid out? It's not really a zoning issue, but just as a site issue.
Generally, with these facilities, the first thing I'll address is the 90% of our calls that'll be EMS related and the patient loading area. And this building does provide us some access. Now, access around the remainder of the structure comes into play based on the fire suppression in the structure. A sprinklered structure certainly has greater guidelines for access road reach to portions of your building. I guess I would be more apt to say as the building permit application would come forward and the applicant's got a final or a relatively complete site plan, we can start talking about access roads around the structure. It's a little fuzzy with how phase 2 is going to play into this. So my initial thought is what's good for phase 1 may not necessarily be good for phase 2. So I guess as a more complete site plan comes our way, we would certainly open the discussions on access road requirements.
And that was my concern with the phase 2 building back there, if that creates issues for us in the future.
Okay. Commissioner Carroll?
Commissioner Johnson, the first one, a 1 year sunset or reversal of zoning is fine. 1, 2, and 3, I don't really have any concerns. As I think someone previously stated, this majority 65 plus to me, I think gives us plenty of room, to limit them not to have extreme case where someone has to live, I really don't want to see us put an age on there. I think the majority being 65 plus, I'm comfortable with. Go ahead, Carrie.
I just wanted to let you know that we did find the definition of housing for the elderly, and that is a dwelling unit or units designed to be occupied by elderly persons and their spouses. An elderly person is a person who is 62 years of age or older on the date such person intends to occupy the premises. So we'd be talking about 7 years.
I guess my question is, multifamily residential, conditional use for community-based residential facility, and then we turn around and look at the elderly. So where does the elderly necessarily come in?
Elderly is under the definition of conditional uses within the multifamily district. So this is something that I had been talking with the city attorney about, whether or not the increase in density could be utilized with that definition for elderly with the proposed CBRF. It was just one of those semantic kind of things that within our code, we didn't anticipate a community-based residential facility that would be catering to a specific group of individuals. So we don't have any overlap in terms of density between a CBRF and one that would cater specifically to elderly folks, based on the definition of what an elderly person is in our code.
I guess I just look at it with that not being there, at some point, we have different illnesses and things that are gonna have to be treated at some point, and you're gonna have to look at it specifically. So I mean, I guess I wouldn't like to see us put too many restrictions based on a very extreme case of someone at 55.
Well, again, this would be, what is being asked is kind of a compromise, because based on this, if you approve an increase in density for housing for the elderly, technically then they wouldn't be able to treat anybody under 62. So they're requesting that you restrict phase 2 to 55 and over, whereas phase 1 would have no restriction. That's the request.
As of what we just came up with here.
Correct.
Shortly. I'm good with the request.
Commissioner Bekavitz?
Pat kind of took it from me. I wasn't really big on restricting the whole age either. If somebody has a memory loss issue at an earlier age, it would be a shame to deny them in here if they were part of the community. This is where their loved ones wanted them, and it was a perfect fit. And his board, you know, just based on a fear of it's gonna swing into a 40-something CBRF, whatever it's gonna be, I just wasn't good with that. Pat pretty much took it away there, so I'm good.
Commissioner Dickman?
I have to agree with some of the other commissioners. I have no problem with items 1, 2, and 3. I don't think there's a, I don't think there's a concern or anything. My only concern with Commissioner Johnson is that, we were talking about a 1 year, adding a 1 year on. Would that be under this particular motion here, or would we wait until they come back with their plans that we add a 1 year on it?
It would be part of the conditions and restrictions.
Of this one here?
No, at the next meeting.
At the next meeting, okay, that's what I want to know, okay.
You wouldn't have to add.
Any other questions or comments on 4B? If none, motion?
Kavich will move that the Plan Commission recommend to the Common Council that the property at 8870 South Mayhew Drive be rezoned from B4 Highway Business to RM1 Multifamily Residential with a conditional use for a community-based residential facility with a capacity for more than 15 persons after a public hearing.
Seifert seconds.
Roll call.
Dickman, aye.
Johnston, aye.
Grillo, aye.
Kavich, aye.
Speedy, aye.
Guzekowski, aye.
Corral, aye.
Seifert, aye.
All right. You're welcome. I'm going to hand off the chair to Commissioner Bekavitz at this time. You got the paperwork?
All right, see you.
He sits low. Okay, item 4C?
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
4C, review site and building plan submitted by Joe Ferguson, Cousin Subs for facade modifications to the existing building at 135 West Rawson. Is somebody, a representative from Cousins here? Okay. Carrie, you want to?
Sure. The request is for approval of facade modifications at the property shown on the screen. There are no additions proposed at this time, but the renovations that will affect the building include the addition of a standing seam roof, replacing the existing roof, really, painting the existing brick a different color, off-white in this case. With the change of the roof materials, I just wanted to make it clear that any rooftop mechanicals or equipment would still have to be screened per the code. The additional changes on the facade include a decorative entry, as we can see in this elevation here, right here. And the materials for that would include some EIFS, corrugated metal panels, a metal coping with cap, and a round sign in the center here, which is not actually part of this review tonight. Additional treatments include, well, that actually will mirror on the drive-through side. Oop. Bear with me a moment. There we go. So it'll also match on the drive-through window side. The only difference is, of course, that this will be corrugated metal at the bottom panel rather than having the columns come all the way down. Corrugated metal and EIFS advertising cabinets are also proposed on the east elevation as well as on the west elevation. The number of signs proposed, these would be categorized as signs if they are used for advertising purposes. That would actually require a sign appeal just for the number of signs, but until that time, which would come at a later date, the cabinets may be used for decorative purposes only, so that means no advertising or signage. So basically, you can have either just empty glass or some kind of artwork that does not include advertising for the business itself. The final change to the property would be replacing the existing fencing on the back of the building here on the south elevation, as well as the dumpster enclosure. They would use the same materials, and that would be a corrugated metal. You can get an idea of what that would look like in this elevation here. The recommendation is that the Plan Commission approves the site and building plan submitted by Joe Ferguson of Cousins Subs for the property at 135 West Rawson Avenue, subject to conditions 1 and 2. Mr. Chairman.
Great. Oh, looks like you got quite a facelift going on here.
Yeah, we do.
At this time, we'll take some questions from the commission.
It's pretty straightforward.
Commissioner Johnston.
Is all the corrugated metal, is that something new from when we talked about this earlier for your facade? I guess I just don't remember.
At that time, I
corrugated metal.
think we had talked about possibly EIFS paint. We had talked about different materials and so forth. One of the things we do is we use corrugated within our restaurant now. If anybody's been to the store, we have completed the interior. So corrugated is a branding material that we're trying to use throughout our stores. And this is similar to, it's an exterior finish that is durable, that we feel fits with the brand.
You don't have any samples of that, do you?
We don't have the actual corrugated material. We just have the color sample, which is a pack clad color, but it's going to be corrugated to be similar to the interior. And then the roofing material will be a different color to kind of accent that and not make it one monochromatic color.
Excuse me, guys, just protocol. We need your name and address for the record.
Yeah, Joe Ferguson, 6146 North Shoreland Avenue, Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Thank you.
Brad Kropp, Perspective Design, 11525 West North Avenue, Wauwatosa, Wisconsin.
Great. Thank you, guys. Brian, you still up?
Yeah, just not a fan of the corrugated material being used there. Seems like we're getting a lot of it there, especially with the fence and.
Yeah, the rear fence is currently a wood fence. It's seen its life be expired here. Again, that material we think is going to be a longer lasting, provide more of a modern look to that element. That fence enclosure right now is where the main mechanicals are for the building. Item number one, I don't know what rooftop equipment you're referring to. Basically, there's currently 4 items on our roof plan. These are hoods and exhausts that exist in the building for operation, and they basically have to come up through the roof and exhaust up. There's a exhaust vent up there. That type of equipment we'd like to maintain as is. Very difficult to screen that, especially on a sloped roof like this, and especially on a building of this age, where we have to deal with current codes for wind and snow loads. If we do any,
Are they mushroom head vents?
yeah, it's your typical hood vent with a shroud on it. Do you have the roof plan in there, Carrie?
Yep.
And we show them as the 2 boxes that are interconnected, just to the right of the drive-through are the larger ones, and then there's 2 smaller ones to the right. The 1 unit in the back we feel is screened. On the bottom right, there's another unit if you pan down and to the right. That's kind of hidden behind the gable from the front elevation. That currently services the coolers and freezers right now that are in operation. So we're just asking that the existing equipment be, not made part of that required screening because of its nature of being a hood. And I didn't know if there's a definition that you had for equipment. Hoods or exhaust systems like that are very different in nature than a rooftop mechanical unit that we have set on the ground in the back of our building.
Yeah, we don't have a definition. It's a standard code requirement that rooftop mechanicals and equipment are screened, so.
Yeah, and that's what I was just trying to get the clarification, because a rooftop unit is very different than an exhaust hood, and they have 2 different purposes where we need it to be out through the roof, so.
Is that it, Brian?
Yes.
Any other questions? Commissioner Correll?
I agree on the corrugated. It seems like it's going to be a lot to look at, but the building's seen its use, and I think to hold them up on the screening of the hoods that aren't that visible, and they've been visible for, I don't know, the building's been there a long time. I don't have as much concern over that. Corrugated, I agree, it's hard without seeing the material.
The rooftop units are not going to be an issue. The fact that it was called out on the plan as rooftop equipment
Yeah,
was
got
one
it.
where it was just,
a general term.
it was a general term, so therefore the general code was applied.
So we're all good with the rooftop guy.
We're good.
Okay.
Thanks.
Commissioner Dickman?
That's exactly what I was going to say. As far as I'm concerned, I've always considered mechanicals as being more air conditioning and, things of those type, which are huge items that have to be screened. And I don't think that was the intent of our code at all, as far as I'm concerned.
I would like to add just the corrugated, the understanding of what that corrugated would look like. I believe it is something that is up and coming as far as a modern look. Number of buildings around town, even the Mayfair Collection in Wauwatosa, has put the corrugated throughout the building on the front of their facade as a decor to kind of modernize that building. And that's something that we're looking to do there. I don't have a sample of the corrugated here, but a number of buildings are using them, even in awning. Characteristics of an awning, people are putting those on modern buildings today. So just like to consider that as well.
And we think it ties in nice with the standing seam roof. We think the standing seam is going to be a nice upgrade to the roofing. It has some of those characters of some symmetrical lines that we're trying to play off of with the corrugated as well.
Okay. Seeing no other questions, I guess I'll just throw my 2 cents in. I agree totally with Commissioner Correll and Mr. Ferguson. As far as the rooftops go, they've been there, the building's been existed. To me, it's just a major facelift. Corrugated's the way they're going. It does give it a fresh, modern look. The fencing, I do go to the place. Fencing needs some upgrades, so I think it's much needed. I'm good with it. Commissioner Dickman.
Yeah, I just want to ask, Carrie, could we drop item number 1, or is there still like a safety factor, keep it in there? Because there are no mechanicals as far as we're concerned on the roof.
No, it's part of the code anyway. This is more just an FYI. So removing it doesn't make it go away. It's just not part of the motion. If a rooftop mechanical was ever to be added, then they'd have to,
They'd have to
they'd
use-
have to apply or abide by that code requirement anyway.
Okay.
But yes, it can be removed.
Okay. Seeing no other questions, I'll call for the question, motion.
Mr. Chairman?
Oh, sorry. Come on up, Arden.
Arden Degner, 8540 South Pennsylvania. I'm not completely familiar where this is located. but-
Rawson and 10th Street, 6th.
First,
Powell.
Oh,
Yes, because as I have deduced over the years, when there was another proposal further east, Howell, there are no sidewalks there. Now, if we have Rawson Avenue as being having direct access to Highway 38 as well as to the west, way out to the, should we not now, instead of having to, 20 years from now, they are remodeling it, should we not require sidewalks so that they are there for this, for our use and for other modifications of this property that will happen later, so that we could safely go from one block to the other. And actually, this is not that far away from the airport. I recall here 4 or 5 years ago that you would find people coming out of the airport terminal looking for a place to eat or a place to do something else. Now, of course, that's all gone. So that with a sidewalk accessing Highway 38, that would make that possible.
True, that's really not a subject of what we're talking about, where we are on the building, and we appreciate you being vigilant about sidewalks within the community. And the Common Council did approve, I believe it was about $185,000 worth of sidewalks, and they're currently coming up from College, working their way towards Rawson. And eventually, with the road improvements on Highway 38, we're bound by state money to put in those sidewalks. So this city will have sidewalks eventually, maybe not overnight, but we will. But it's really not a stipulation of their remodel to do that. But we do appreciate your input on that. Seeing no further questions, did we have a motion?
Richard Dickman makes a motion, the Plan Commission approve the site and building plan submitted by Joe Ferguson of Cousin Subs for the property at 135 West Rawson Avenue, subject to the condition that all building and fire codes are met.
Guzekowski will second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Roll call.
Dickman, aye.
Johnston, aye.
Carrillo, aye.
Gavich, aye.
Guzekowski, aye. Crowell, aye.
Seifert, aye.
Great, thank you, good luck, man.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Item 4E, PC consultation, initial discussion regarding potential reduction.
Nope.
D.
Back up.
4D.
Oh, 4D, I'm sorry.
Skip D.
We skipped right over, and they're probably waiting for their item. Plan review, site and plan and building reviews submitted by Tracy Uptall, Tracy Rays, for an addition to an existing building located at 823 West Oakwood. Applicants are here.
Okay, so this is a request for approval of a proposed 31-foot by 24-foot or 774 square feet, for those of you keeping tabs, single-story addition onto the rear of the existing building. So the addition would actually be for kitchen and dining space. You can see that there is the addition onto the rear of the existing building here. Zoom in, you can get an idea of where exactly that'll be. So we're talking about the addition right here on the back of the building. Right here is Oakwood Road. There's no additional impervious surface proposed, as this will be on an existing concrete pad. Aluminum siding is proposed to match the existing building, but that is not an approved primary building material, so therefore it would require a 3/4 majority approval of the Plan Commission. Flat roofs are also not permitted in commercial districts. However, the addition will not be seen by any more than those going, what did I say, it'll only be seen on the east elevation by vehicles traveling westbound on Oakwood Road, and also the addition is not part of the primary roof line. You're not going to see it. So therefore, staff supports the request. Although the lot does not currently meet the 30% open space requirement, the addition will not reduce the amount of open space on the property. Additionally, no landscaping is proposed around the new portion of the building. Staff kind of recommends that you consider putting in container plants around there. The recommendation is that the Plan Commission approves the site and building plan submitted by Tracy, I'm sorry, how do you pronounce your last name? Utfall, thank you. Of Tracy Reyes for the property at 823 West Oakwood Road, subject to conditions 1 through 2. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Well, we have a thriving little business in Oak Creek that's looking to expand. Questions from the commission? Commissioner Siepert.
Yeah, I have a question with the fire department. How do you feel about this addition? Are there any concerns that you may have?
What we would encourage the applicant to do is to contact the fire department. You're adding a kitchen and a dining area, and there's going to be certain code requirements based on that, and your occupancy numbers are going to change. Now, it's difficult to say exactly what level, if any, of protection or detection would need to take place in there until we see the layout of the area, the kitchen area, in a little bit more detail, and the type of appliances that'll be in that kitchen area. So certainly, it's a little bit premature to outline a concern, understanding that they will need to meet all fire codes. Because it is an addition to a structure, we also have to go back and look at the past remodel history of the facility, because it is incremental. Certainly if you've done work in the past, any percentage of that remodel would add on to the percentage of this addition. So I guess from looking at it globally, we'd have to evaluate their current plan and look back at past remodels and determine the level of fire protection needed. That being said, do I have any concerns? Based on code compliance, this is a relatively straightforward project.
Any other questions? No. Commissioner Dickman.
I want to ask you, with the additional area for dining, you have more seating, space and everything. What will be the capacity then of your restaurant? And I'm tying it into the amount of parking, because it makes it look like your parking lot is all marked off beautifully, but when I drove past it, it doesn't look like it's marked off at all.
Well, that'll be, when it gets done, we're gonna, actually, there's an existing garage that we're gonna knock down and get rid of it, because it's in a really old garage and it's ugly. So once we get rid of the garage, that'll open up a few more spaces back there, and it just needs to be regraded back there from previous owners of not doing anything back there.
Okay, so it's just graded area, it's not...
It's all stone back there.
It's all stone, is that okay, Pete? Okay.
Okay. And I'm sorry, I'm dropping the ball. We need your name and address for the record. Second time in a row I dropped the ball here.
Sean Utpal, 3248 Shortridge Drive, Racine.
Tracy Ray, Johannick Utpal, 3248 Shortridge Drive, Racine.
Thank you.
Hey.
Any other questions?
I will just make an apology. We do have a preliminary layout of the addition on the interior, but for whatever reason, it's not part of the graphics here, so I just provided that to the assistant chief here.
Sir?
Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
That's certainly something we can sit down with the occupants and go over their plans and come up with a strategy to meet any fire protection needs. To answer I think you asked about the capacity of the restaurant. That'll be calculated on the square footage, the type of occupancy. And that's something that gets calculated through the construction process.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. I guess I'm going to ask a few questions. You're going to have to educate me a little bit, because I've never been to your establishment. Can you just kind of give me a description of what type of restaurant you got, how long you've been doing it, and how things are going?
Actually, it was my aunt, Noreen's, for many years, and I worked for her.
Noreen's.
It was, she originally had it as a NASCAR bar.
Okay.
Where she just did.
This is the old Noreen's.
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
So.
Noreen's I was familiar with.
Well, there you go, now you know.
Okay,
And then
go ahead.
She passed. My
Oh.
cousin ran it,
Okay.
and since I was her niece and almost like her daughter. I didn't want it to obviously go outside the family, so we purchased it. So we just kind of wanted to keep that local bar feeling, the comfortable feeling, but I wanted just to make it a little bit more comfortable so more people felt comfortable coming in. It wasn't just gonna be a NASCAR bar. We wanna make it more of a sports themed type bar with a comfortable, local place to hang out and have a good, burger, good steak sandwich, something small, nothing crazy large.
That's great. That's great.
Small and family.
Excellent. Seeing no more questions, motion.
Sorry.
Oh, we got one, Pat? Oh, Pat, go ahead.
Yeah, just to get back to what Commissioner Dickman started. So there's an addition, and I know the occupancy will get calculated, but when we look at everything else, parking is an issue based on occupancy of the business that's going there. So do we have to look at any of that yet, or is it a non-issue? I mean, it's been there forever, so I don't.
Well, I believe there's, the way I had it drawn out on the print, there's over 40 spaces total. There's about 36 in the back, and I think there's 6 or 7 out front.
I think there's plenty there, obviously, over the years, but if someone
When we
did this
did
type of parking now,
when we did a review, we asked the applicant to mark out on the site plan the number of parking spaces based on our dimensions, and based on the current existing space as well as what was going to be added, there should be more than adequate parking.
I guess my question is it more educational for me after, I don't know, 12, 15 years up here? We're making people in industrial parks cover up gravel and put asphalt, and now we've got a commercial or a retail building with a gravel parking lot. So I'm just asking what our code is, or is, what am I missing there?
Typically, when you have an existing facility, we have not always consistently required to have paved parking. Definitely if it was a brand-new
But the change in ownership doesn't require any of that? That's my concern.
It's the same use, it's the same.
Same use.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, seeing no more questions, call for the question. Motion?
Crowell moves that the commission approves the site and building plans submitted by Tracy Utfall, Tracy Rays for the property 823 West Oakwood Road, subject to the following conditions. 1, that all rooftop mechanicals and equipment are screened. 2, that all building and fire codes are met.
Seifert seconds.
Motion's been made and seconded. Roll call, please.
Dickman, aye.
Johnston, aye.
Crillo, aye.
Kavich, aye.
Guzekowski, aye.
Crowell, aye.
Seifert, aye.
Good luck.
Good luck.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Last item of the night, 4E, PC consultation. Initial discussion regarding potential reduction in parking setbacks for the right-of-way in the M1 manufacturing districts. Carrie or Pete? Who's taking?
I will just give a brief overview. We don't have any graphics for this. This would apply to the entire M1 district, and it is just an initial discussion, so there is no requirement for any kind of plan commission action, just more to get a general feeling from the commission about this. We've had several discussions lately, and some applications that have been reviewed by the commission with regard to parking and existing businesses and parking and proposed businesses in the M1 district. And so those concerns have to do with the parking setback to the right-of-way. Currently, we require a 40-foot setback from all rights-of-way for parking lots. If you'll recall, this was an issue for Black Bear on 20th Street, and we had to come up with some creative solution to that, which ended up that they bought the property next door. That's not always going to be a feasibility for some of these businesses to buy up property in order to meet the setbacks. I'm not saying that that would be the only way to do it. You could apply for a variance, but the variance criteria requires that you prove hardship. And the variance criteria are strict for a reason, and that's set by the state. So there is what staff believes to be a suitable solution, and that's to reduce the parking setback requirement from 40 to 30 feet to rights-of-way. Now, the Plan Commission did recommend that the Common Council approve that amendment to the Oakview Business Park, where it was reduced from 40 to 30. And that allowed some flexibility in design, and it also allowed that enough room for easements and landscaping and sidewalks to occur within that business park. So we mentioned at the time that staff would be looking at the feasibility of applying that standard throughout the city. And that was to be more consistent and to allow a little bit more flexibility. So right now, this presentation is more to gauge the Plan Commission's feeling on the proposal, whether or not staff should proceed to a formal text amendment procedure.
With that, we'll open the discussion. Commissioner Correll.
I think at least in my opinion, we kind of agreed to that over the Black Bear one. I think there's one other one, so I don't have a problem with it. I think we should just be consistent. I think it works.
Commissioner Johnston.
Especially in manufacturing areas, we always run into an issue that they're trying to pack so much stuff in there. I really don't have an issue if they go to a 30-foot setback. What if we add in there too, along with that, they have curb and gutter around their parking lot?
Okay.
Good point. Good. I agree with that about the curb and gutter. That would help.
Commissioner Dickman.
I don't have a problem with the 40-foot setback at all. I was just wondering, I'm sure that this was made a requirement many, many, many years ago, and I was wondering if it was able to figure out why did we pick 40 feet? Just that it sounded good, or?
That standard has been in existence for so long that I'm not sure I could give you a really good answer as to why it's 40 feet as opposed to any other setback requirement. I don't know if there was any thought process as to street widenings or what have you, and I wouldn't even want to speculate on it at this point. But again, assuming that all the other dimensional requirements would be met for a specific application, then we feel that a 30-foot setback would be appropriate. Yeah. Now, that's not going to work in every case. There are going to be some instances where a 30-foot setback is probably going to cause some kind of an issue that we haven't seen yet. But a 30-foot across the board is probably a good standard to go by, especially considering the applications that we've seen lately.
Commissioner Carrillo?
Do we know the standards of the communities around us?
We haven't explored that at this point. It's just an initial discussion. We can look into that, but again, our 40-foot standard has been around for quite some time. It's been decades.
Okay.
Even I don't remember when it was issued.
Anyone else?
Do we know what other communities have for a setback?
As Commissioner Correll just asked, yes, we will look into what that would be.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, we can look at what Franklin's code is. We can look at South Milwaukee. We can get a couple other. We can get a couple of ideas from other surrounding communities, but I would suspect that every community has something slightly different. It's probably no standard throughout.
I guess I'll just weigh in. I'm okay with the 30-foot setback also. I mean, standardize it. Why 40 was picked, I don't know. Parking, I know we're talking M1, but when we get into commercial places, we always have this discussion on parking. We had it with the Granite Place. Discussions are going on at Drexel Town Square about the parking requirements. It always seems to be an issue, and sometimes we're victims of our own setbacks and our own requirements. We make it very difficult for people to develop. So again, I think the flexibility helps. Mr. Dagner.
Mr. Chairman, may I make a comment?
Sure.
Art Dagner, 8540 South Pennsylvania Avenue. I see a reason for a large setback when you have an industrial property with parking in various configurations when we have a 2-foot snow. I've seen those piles up in front of my place, back in the 70s, 10 foot high. And that means that in this area of Wisconsin, we have to allow for the snow pile up instead of, maybe they have to dump it all in Lake Michigan like they tried one time, but keep that in mind.
Thank you for that input, and staff will take that into consideration.
Sure, and every application that comes forward, we can always ask for a snow management plan.
That's good.
Great. Any further discussion? If not, I think we gave you a pretty clear direction to go with.
Yep, staff will take these considerations into our research, and we will come back at a later date with some more information for you.
Okay, hearing no more discussion, last adjournment.
Corolla moves to adjourn at 7:14.
Crowell seconds.
Roll call.
Dickman, aye.
Johnston, aye.
Corolla, aye.
Gavich, aye.
Crowell, aye.
Seabird, aye.
Great. Thank you all for watching. Stay classy, Oak Creek.